You're listening to a podcast by Way Collective, a contemplative community for love and liberation in Santa Barbara, California. This recording was the conversation starter at our dinner and dialogue gathering with Dr. Karen Rice on February 4th, 2026. Thanks for tuning in.
The camera's back there? Okay. Hello, Carl and Troy also. Well, friends, excellent, and I'm waving at them. I'm delighted. For those of you who don't know who don't know me, I'm Karen, and I was one of the curators here for 3 really beautiful years. And I haven't been back in almost 2 full years. And so it's a real joy to be with you, and to be in this space and to eat good food with you. And it's just a joy. I think where I want to start is to, I'm just going to pick up where I left off, which is that so much of what I love about this community is that what brings us together, among many other things, is that many of us are on a process of change and transformation. We don't necessarily believe the same things we used to believe. We don't necessarily enact values in the same way we used to. It's a great part of what inspires me about this community is people's willingness and openness to transformation and to becoming. It's beautiful. And I think what I'm going to talk about tonight is part of what can stymie our becoming is our fear of a lack of belonging. We sometimes hold ourselves back from becoming because we are afraid that the communities we might move into will judge us or reject us. We won't fit in, we won't belong. And I think that this is, unfortunately, happens a lot around activism, around taking steps toward justice, is that we feel that if we don't do it exactly right, we'll get off on the wrong foot, everyone will judge us, and we won't belong, and we might even do more harm than good. And so my hope is to offer compassionate space for that fear that you won't belong, and also just like my wholehearted confidence that you can do so much good, that you can find belonging and shape belonging. And I mean this both belonging in activist spaces, and I mean also protecting the belonging of our immigrant and non-white neighbors who are being attacked here locally by ICE. So just to set the stage, I'm going to start my timer. On the Central Coast, in the 3 counties, SLO, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties, in the last year, over 1,600 confirmed kidnappings have taken place. 1,600 confirmed, and more that we maybe had heard about but they weren't able to confirm. 600 of those have happened since November. Just as I was driving in today, my phone lit up with news that a confirmed ICE vehicle was driving up the 101 from Camarillo, which is one of their bases, and they also have a base in Santa Maria. Just 2 weeks ago, someone in Santa Barbara was pepper sprayed in the face as she was filming ICE agents. One of our lead organizers had his uncle taken last week. So the fear is already here. The violence is already here. They've already busted out windows to pull people out of cars. And so the things that we see in places like Minnesota and places like Chicago, they're already here. We are grateful, not to that extent yet, but that means we have an opportunity to act. And I think maybe numbers kind of wash over you. It can be hard to keep track. It can be hard to remain vulnerable, kind of like Tim said, remain open to the moral reality of what's going on around us. So I want you to think back to a moment that broke through to you in the last couple of months, right? We hear so many awful news stories a day. If you're like me, It's often just, I feel bombarded, I feel knocked back and forth, like, oh my, we're declaring war on who, what's happening, like just back and forth, back and forth. But sometimes something breaks through to us where our soul responds with, that is not right. And it brings us into the present moment. So for some people, a recent breakthrough moment might have been when Renee Good was shot and killed in Minnesota with her wife next to her. For other people, it could have been when Alex Preddy was shot and killed. For other people, that breakthrough moment could have been when Liam Conejos Ramos, 5-year-old with the blue hat on, you maybe saw his picture, when he was taken by ICE and then used as bait to try to get his mom to come out of the house so they could get her too. We have these breakthrough moments where there is just deep clarity, deep compassion. And often, when we have those moments, often other people are as well, right? There are these moments that all of a sudden it seems like it broke through to lots of us. And I celebrate those moments as hard as they are. Your soul is still intact. You are still in touch with the moral reality of the world around us. And often, especially if lots of us have shared kind of that breakthrough, you will immediately see online a lot of hot takes about why did you care about Renee Good and not about the single father in Chicago who was Latine, who was shot and killed several weeks before? Or why do you care about Alex Preddy being shot and the fact that he was carrying a gun legally, but you didn't care about Philando Castile in 2016, a Black man who was shot in front of his fiancée and daughter while he was legally carrying a gun, right? We see these hot takes online, these critiques. Why do you care now and you didn't care before? Or you just care now because you're personally afraid. You didn't care when it was just people who didn't look like you. We see these critiques, right? And I want to say there's validity in all of those, most of those. We do need to consider what the ways that our empathy has been constrained. Other people might say, like, why do you care about like harming journalists in the US when you didn't care about them being killed in Gaza, right? Being specifically targeted, right? We can have these critiques. Why do you care now? Why are you motivated by this and not that? And we can make space for that. But I think the fear that it can stir up in us to see those immediate critiques, you had moral clarity, your soul called you to action, and then all of a sudden, a lot of people you saw online said, no, this is the wrong time. You should have done this before. You should have done it then. You should be motivated in a different way, right? And while I honor the validity of those critiques, we may then fear, if I actually take action, people are going to be mad at me because I didn't take action before, right? People are going to judge me if I show up and I only showed up now, and why didn't I show up before, right? There's that fear that we won't belong in activist spaces, in spaces of community care. And what I want to tell you is, I can tell you with 100% certainty that if you donate money to a mutual aid fund locally, they're not going to ask you whose murder motivated you, and if you answer wrong, they're going to give you back your money, right? If you sign up for a patrol shift to look out for ICE, I promise you, they're not going to be like, why now and why not before? Are you grieving the right people the right amount in your heart? Right? We will say, welcome. We are tired, please help, right? Maybe someone will judge you in their heart. Maybe they will say, oh, this white lady named Karen finally shows up, okay, right? Okay. Is my fear of being judged more important than the great good that I can do in solidarity with others? And some of us, myself included, we care so much about doing the right thing. We care so much about helping people. And if we mess up, if we harm someone, it is devastating. I feel that deeply. I feel crushed when I find out I've done something in a way that harmed someone or that wasn't the right way. But I can tell you with 100% certainty, any mistakes you make in showing up are smaller in scale than the good that you can do. You have such capacity for community care that will vastly outweigh the missteps that we may have, right? It's good to learn from those missteps. It's good to try to minimize them. And I'll get into some concrete ways to move toward action that can help build belonging. But I guess my question is, would you judge someone, and just this is an intentionally provocative example, would you judge someone who only jumped in to fight the Nazis in 1943 because they didn't start in 1939? We're in this for years. I'm sorry to say, we're in this for years. And I say that's heavy, right? But it's also your capacity to do good, your ability to work in solidarity with your neighbors has years to grow. The good that you will do so far outweighs that maybe you're a few months later than you would want to be, or that you were maybe not motivated by the exact right thing to start out with. I just have so much belief and confidence in your capacity to handle that initial awkwardness. Maybe someone judges you, maybe not. Because I have so much belief in your ability to make a difference. So the second tool that I might suggest to build our sense of belonging in activist spaces, right? Because we don't just worry that we won't belong because we're motivated incorrectly or came in too late or whatever, don't know all the answers. We also sometimes feel like we don't belong because we don't know what ways to get involved, right? And we sometimes think there's an image. My partner Naomi is a sociologist, and so she talks about this, a controlling image of activists. There's this image we have, you could think of it kind of like a stereotype, but it's that activists know all the answers, that they are deeply committed to the cause, that's the only thing they do, and that they are putting themselves at great risk. That's what it means to be an activist. And certainly that's what some people undertake, but there is such a richer ecosystem around a social movement, or if you prefer, around a community, where there are many, many different roles that can make a difference. And so I'm gonna move now into one of the most useful tools. I held about 7 or 8 what I called What's Next workshops last year, people responding to the current situation and like, what's next? What can I do? And the most useful tool is created by Deepa Iyer. And it is, everyone should get one of these handouts. We might have to turn lights on higher because the type is small and I apologize. If you don't have a handout, let me know. I'm not sure. I don't think so, because I think she's pretty young. So, and on, I think hopefully we can send you the PDF, Carla and Troy. So, so I didn't invent this. This is credit to Deepa Iyer, who's a longtime movement worker. And one of the most beautiful things that she offers is this rich, so you'll see on the page, a bunch of colored circles. And these are what she identifies as some roles that we can play in a social movement ecosystem. In the center of this, you'll see in the yellow, different values that could be motivating you. And you can fill in your own different values or causes. But the beautiful thing is that all 10 of these ways are ways you can take action around that same value or cause, right? You can be equally committed to a certain value, and it can look really different how you participate versus how I participate, right? And so let me just briefly, on the facing side, there's a brief description of what these different roles mean. While I talk through them, I'd invite you to take note for yourself. Circle or star the roles that you feel most comfortable in. You feel confident, you feel experienced. You might also note the ones that you feel least comfortable with, most hesitant about. That's worth noting. So, and the examples I will give of how to fulfill those are all going to be local people I know, I'll change some names, who are working specifically around protecting our immigrant neighbors, right? So just so you can have any value or any issue at the heart of this, like for instance, if you're someone who cares about like abortion access and reproductive rights, that could be at the center that you take action on in any of these ways. But for me, I'm going to stay centered on our immigrant neighbors. So at the top in the purple, there is the weaver role. And I think of, there's many people in this room who I think of who fill this really beautifully. Weavers see through lines of connectivity between people, places, organizations, ideas, and movements. So for example, I got involved with the Rapid Response Hotline because people who I had worked with on the Gaza Solidarity Encampment a couple years ago invited me in, right? There was a connection that they knew that we had built, and so the weavers say, I know that you're really great at this. I know that you care about this. Come join over here. It's a weaver, someone who brings together groups. Think about someone who always has a guy, like, oh, I know someone who can do this thing, right? Experimenters, those are folks who innovate, pioneer, and invent, take risks, and course correct. It can be easy for any of these to picture someone doing extreme, the most possible. And I want to make clear that we can do this in little ways too. So an experimenter could be, even in the Way Collective connection here, trying it out on a Wednesday night, that's an experiment, right? Having dinner together first, that's an experiment. So trying out new things. So for instance, they did a art protest underneath the highway goes underneath the bridge. They did a nativity where Jesus had been taken by ice. It was an experiment. I don't know that many people had their minds changed, but we tried it, right? It was an experiment to try to make a difference around this value. There are frontline responders. In our case, that's lots of people who are on the rapid response hotlines, which means when people see ICE, they come out, they warn their neighbors, they give out know your rights cards. They do follow-up to see, has anyone been kidnapped and can we support the families? 805 on DocuFund gives cash to families who have had a person kidnapped so that they can stay in their house for that month and hopefully longer. Frontline responders. We also patrol every morning. I don't know if you have a commitment every single morning between 5:30 and 8. If you don't, come patrol with me. That's an opportunity, but that's not for everybody, right? There are visionaries. Those are folks who imagine and generate our boldest possibilities, hopes, and dreams, keep us focused on the direction. Those are folks who can imagine a world without borders and invite us into it. I think about that with Primitiva Hernandez is the leader of 805 on DocuFund, and she has been pushing, and her commitment to immigrants in our community has been consistent for years and has been a North Star that we follow. There are builders. Those are folks who leverage, it could be money, it could be, these are the spreadsheet people, bless you, we love a spreadsheet. These are people who think about, hey, who's gonna do the dishes after we do a gathering, right? That is a gift you can bring to a movement. That is a way to live out your values, is doing the nitty-gritty administrative or financial work behind the scenes. There are caregivers, folks who nurture and nourish the people around them by creating a community of care, joy, and connection. At the vigil that was held in Santa Barbara after Renee Good was killed, I was in bad shape and I wasn't sure if I wanted to be there. It was like I could be on safety team, but I don't feel like, so I called y'all know, I called Caitlin Smith and was like, she couldn't come to the vigil that night, but I said, I don't really feel emotionally stable, but I want to be here in community. Can you just be on the phone with me? And so she just was quietly on the phone with me while I was there, having a lot of big feelings about things, about I would do this differently, and I'm so sad and angry. And she was just quietly on the phone with me. So there's these caregiver roles. It could also like babysitting for someone so they can go to a training, right? There are healer roles. In Deepa Iyer's framework, that's a little bit more like trauma specific and like generational, like identifying generational harms and that kind of thing. But we had, I did a recent, speaking of trauma, I did a Stop the Bleed training recently, a bunch of us did. So where we like had to practice on like prosthetic wounds that were gushing blood and we were like stuffing stuff in there. They had therapists there and they did body work with us in between to try to shake off, all right, you've had this big spike of adrenaline. How can we take care of each other moving on, right? So there's the healing role that you can take. There's also disruptive roles. And some people might think about this as like the folks who like scream in the face of ICE agents, and that's a beautiful role, I celebrate it. And it can look like speaking up at a meeting and saying, like at the end of one of my work meetings, I just was like, hey, did y'all know that just today, this morning, a couple of people got kidnapped just downtown. If anyone wants to come patrol with me, let me know. But I was a little nervous before I did that. I'm fine to stand up to an ICE agent. I felt nervous before that meeting, before I spoke up, because it's just a little bit of like, let me invite you into the moral reality of this moment. There are storytellers. Those are folks who contribute art and music. There's, I think, going to be some exciting possibilities of some singing resistance groups like we've seen in Minnesota. It looks like some folks are going to start that here, which I'm really excited about. It could also be like you paint or draw a sign to put in your front yard. It's bringing your creative gifts to the movement. And then there are guides. Those are folks who bring kind of that mentorship and wisdom. So I'll wrap up here. And what I want to say is these roles, it's not exactly a personality quiz, right? What's important is what the community needs, what the ecosystem is missing. But it's also important where you do have gifts to give, right? So we might be called to move into some new roles that we hadn't been in before. But it's also when we're misaligned, when it's just a role that you hate and just it drains you every time, this is a beautiful chance to say, what creativity can I bring? What other role might be a better fit for me? So as I close, I want to say again that I celebrate and honor when something breaks through to you, when a harm or a celebration, when something breaks through to you morally, I really honor it. You are still alive and whole. And may you move bravely into action, finding where you belong and trusting that that initial awkwardness, that you can survive that because you have so much to contribute on the other side, in whatever way that looks like. So we'll turn now to the questions for conversation. On the back of this document, there's a few of the questions, but it's also like I've given really specific for each of these. I've given really specific things that I think many people in this room could do in each of the roles, just to give you some sense of the possibilities. So our discussion questions for yourself. I invite you to tell a short story of when you joined a new group and grew to feel that you belong. We've all practiced this before, right? We've all had the awkwardness of joining, and we've all, maybe not in every group, we've all found our belonging some places. Tell a story of that. Bolster yourself and others with that experience. Our sacred question, do you associate the divine or love with any of these modalities or roles? When I was growing up, I was taught that God was a lot more like maybe the visionary, maybe the guide, But as I started to think about what would it look like for me to envision love with a capital L embodying these roles, is there something that's healing to me about that? Is there any sense of possibility? And the society question. What has been a recent breakthrough moment of your soul connecting to the pain of the world? And is there something you feel drawn to do in response? I'm so grateful to get to hear your wisdom around the tables. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks for listening to this podcast by Way Collective. To keep up with our community, you can subscribe to this podcast, go to www.waycollective.org, or follow us on Instagram at @waycollective. Peace and every good, y'all.